Thanks for tuning in at Brackeys.
Hello everyone and welcome to video number 23 in Make a Game, a cool series on making a video game in Unity. In today's video we'll take a look at making an end scene which will be displayed once we've completed all of our levels. We'll also have a look in that context at scene switching. And we'll also do some GUI work to update how our score is displayed. So here's the plan for today. We'll start out by making the graphics for our endpoint. But before we get started, I just quickly want to mention that if you have any questions, go to forum.brackeys.com. And also, if you want to support Brackeys or just want some cool merchandise, you can go to brackeys.spreadshirt.net. The link will also be in the description, and I will probably have some kind of annotation on the screen. And here you can buy all kinds of Brackeys merchandise. There's also an INM developer t-shirt, and I've kind of redesigned the store here. So if you want to support Brackeys, and you can do that by, of course, donating or going here and getting something cool for yourself. Okay, so that was enough self-promotion for one video, I think. So let's get started by opening up Unity. And you will see that nothing really has changed here. However, you will notice that I'm currently using the dark theme. But again, everything we are going to be doing will be completely available to you using the personal edition, which is of course free. Cool. So the first thing we'll do here is making the graphics for our endpoint. So currently we have these invisible checkpoints, and our endpoint will work somewhat like those. So first off, let's go to Game Objects. Let's go under and create a particle system. Let's drag this over here. Actually, let's reset the transform to make it reset on the Z. Drag it up a bit and over here so we can see what we're doing. We'll also make a 3D object sphere, and we'll rename this to, let's just rename this to endpoint. Make sure to check is trigger on the sphere collider because we're going to be using it as a trigger later. We'll then drag the particle system under our endpoint and reset the transform on that, and reset the transform on our endpoint. This way we can simply drag both of them, and things should look pretty awesome. Now inside of this endpoint here, this is going to be kind of our core, and so I just want this to be kind of an additive material. So we'll right click, create material, and we'll simply call this, let's do simply endpoint mat maybe. We'll figure that out as we go, but I want to go under the particles, additive, and the texture is just going to be the default particle one. That should be imported with any Unity project. And we'll simply leave the tint color as is here and drag it under there, just to give it this cool looking glowy core. Once we get some particles in here, this will look much better. You can of course change the tiling here to adjust kind of how it will look, but for now this should be pretty fine. So actually, yeah, let's just call that the endpoint mat, and I will duplicate this and make this the endpoint particles, or maybe particle, whatever you want to name that, and that's going to be the material for our particles. So now we can go into our particle system. And we can go under the renderer, and we can drag in our endpoint particles. And now we can adjust that material down here. For example, we can tint the color in a kind of orange looking color there. And I'm actually going to go all in with that for now. I think that looks pretty nice. And because we're using the additive blend mode, you can see that it looks super cool depending on what the background is. Awesome. So let's go into the shape here and change that to a sphere. Let's just drag this out. And by the way, this video might be a bit longer than usual, but we'll just see as we go. I might need to split it up into multiple parts. Cool, so let's just drag this out a bit. And basically the effect I'm going for here is this kind of vortex where our particles are getting drawn towards our center here. So in order to do that, I want to emit only from the shell. And instead of letting the particles kind of flow out, let's inverse their speed to something like -1. And that might be a bit too much. So let's change this to a random between two constants. And let's do -0.3 maybe and -0.5. So you can see that they are moving inwards, and we can change the lifetime to maybe 3. And you can see now that they are getting sucked towards the center. And we can also change the start size, just bump that down for now, so we can see more clearly what's going on. And you can see right now this lifetime is actually too short or too long, because they are moving past the center and then continuing. So let's just change the lifetime to, let's try 2. And that actually looks pretty accurate. I kind of want them to pile up in the center here. What we can do is we can change the velocity over lifetime, simply limited over lifetime actually, to make them slow down as they reach the center. And we can do that by, what is it? We need to change the speed here by using a curve. Yeah, okay, so go over here and select curve, and we will simply make that fall off. So you can see they slow down as they reach the center and should start piling up in there. And now we can just bump up the lifetime again, and we'll be sure that they don't go too far. So that looks pretty good. Next up, I want to kind of make them grow as they reach the center. So in order to do that, we're gonna set the size over lifetime. So the size here, we'll simply drag. I'm just going to choose one of these presets with a curve here. So I'm going to change this curvy one, and I'll just bump up the start size a bit, so that they are not entirely invisible once they spawn. And I think we can bump up the overall size a bit too. Something like that looks a lot better, and we can maybe also randomize this. So let's choose random between two constants, and let's do 0.4 and 0.6 maybe, just so that doesn't look too uniform. Let's also bump up the emission amount. Let's try 30. Now that's starting to look really awesome. And yeah, I'm actually quite satisfied with that. Let's also fade them in and out. So let's go into color over lifetime, bump that down, and up here we'll simply choose an alpha of 0. Here we'll choose an alpha of max, which is 255, and just get that quick fade up there, and do the same up here. Something like that. And I think that looks really smooth and cool. So let's see that in the game. And I want this to be a kind of concentrated effect. I can see that they start out a bit too large. I think that looks a bit cooler. And I also want to bring this in a bit, which means that we'll have to bump down our lifetime here to, let's say, 2. And I also want to simply scale down our endpoint graphic there a bit. Whoops, that actually scaled our particle system too. So one thing we might want to do is simply remove the sphere collider from this, create an empty game object instead, which is going to be our endpoint. We can then rename this to, let's say, mesh or graphics, or whatever you want to do. I'm going to call this one graphics. And I'm going to have the particle system here also, so particles. And then this way we can control all of these separately. So we can simply scale down this without affecting the rest. And you can see that gives us a cool looking core, especially if we go into this material here and change the color to something more orangey. And we can also rotate this so that the highlight points towards our camera. I think that looks really cool. And now we can add a sphere collider here, change the trigger, and simply bump in the radius so that it fits. And we are going to reset these on the transform. Whoops, that reset everything. So we are simply going to reset the position. So 0, 0, 0, and 0, 0, 0. Yeah, that looks really awesome. And now we can reset that one, drag it up, drag it over. And you can see that everything is actually working now. So once we hit play now, we should see this core here, which we can bump into. You will, however, notice that it starts out looking a little bit weird, and that's because we have to pre-warm our particle system in order for it to look cool right from the beginning, or else it's going to start spawning particles from when we play the game. You can bump up the size a bit on these particles if you want the effect to be more crazy, or maybe do a bit more particles. Something like this, but I think this looks good for now, and of course you can always do more tweaking. So let's drag this into a prefab and place it under the prefabs folder. Now on this, we're going to create a script that will switch scenes once we collide with this trigger. So in here, we'll simply create an endpoint script, and of course we want this to be of type JavaScript. Now let's double click this to open it up in Mono Develop. Oops, come on, there we go, and it's opening up. And in here, I'm just gonna zoom in a bit on the code here. Basically all we wanna do is we want to have a function called onTriggerEnter, and make sure to spell it the exact same way that I've done, because remember, this is a method that Unity is set to call whenever something enters our trigger. And we're going to collect some collider info, and that's going to be of type collider. And that collider info is going to allow us to check for a tag, and we're going to check if that's equal to player. And this is all something we've been over before. Then if it is actually the player we are colliding with, we want to call a method that we are storing on our game master, and that's going to be the load next level method. And we're going to create that in a second, but we're simply going to call it for now. So we're going to make a game master reference here of type game master. And then in here, we're simply going to do game master.load next level. This way, our game master will take care of everything once we are loading a next level, such as storing the score and what level we want to load and everything like that. Cool. So now we can simply save this script, and it is going to give us some errors because currently we don't have this method. Actually, it's not, but it is going to do that once we play and enter. Yeah, there you can see that we aren't. Oh yeah, that's because we haven't set up the reference, so we can do that too. Simply drag in the GM there, and that should be working. Now you can see that it couldn't load this level because it wasn't added to the build settings. That's actually kind of weird. Okay, I see why it wasn't giving us an error now. That's because I've changed this script just to practice out what we're going to be doing today. So now I've reverted those changes, and you should see that, yeah, okay, there's no load next level on the game master. So now it's actually complaining like it should. Okay, sorry about that, never mind it. So basically what we want to do is go into the game master script, and in here we want to add a method or function called load next level. And it's not going to take in any parameters. However, it is going to simply load up application.load level. And the level that we are going to load is simply going to be the next level in our build settings. So you could do some kind of a variable that chose what level to load here. You can load using a name. So simply if we want it to load an int level, if we've made that, you can do that using a simple string. But I'm simply going to do application.loaded level. So it's going to take the current level by an index, and then do a +1 in order to make it load the next level in the series. So if we do this and save this out, we'll actually have complete control over what level is loaded inside of our file build settings. In here, we can simply add scenes, and it's simply going to load the next one. So suddenly the build settings order is going to be very important, because you can see over here, we have the index. So if we're on level 1, it's going to try and load 1 + 1, which is level 2. And that also means that if you don't add a level here, it's going to give us an error. So make sure that you drag in the game master here and hit play, and you can see that this is going to give us an error. And the error is that level 2 couldn't be loaded because it has not been added to the build settings. That's actually a very good error because it tells you exactly what you need to do. Awesome. So basically what we want to do now is we want to make another level. And we can simply make a quick test level here. You can have as many levels as you want. So I'm simply going to duplicate level 1 and make a level 2 here instead. Whoops, I hadn't saved it, so it didn't store all the changes. Let's load up level 1 here. Make sure we have an endpoint. And let's also apply our changes on that. Save the scene. And now we duplicate the level. It's going to automatically rename it to level 2. And just to show that this is another level, I'm going to add in some kind of object here, just a cube. So we can see the difference on the two levels. That has a cube right there. And I'm going to save that. And when we now go into our main menu, let's just play from the beginning. Hit play game. Go in here. It's going to load up. Whoops. Of course, we need to add it to the build settings. So build settings and drag in level 2 here. And let's try that again. Hit play. Play again. Go in there and it's going to load up level 2. Now let's say that we wanted to have an end scene which displays our final score. And our final score is simply going to be a sum of all of the amounts of coins we've collected throughout our levels. But currently we only have a system that actually remembers the score that we have for the current level. Because if we go into our game master script, you will see that we have this static variable called current score. And remember, static variables will persist between scenes. So this is going to be remembered, but it's reset every time we restart the scene. So basically we want to have another static variable called the final score. And this is also going to be of type integer and default to 0. Then what we can do with this is we make sure not to reset it every time, but every time we load a next level, and you don't want to do this inside the restart level. We only want to do this if we've actually completed the level. Then we want to add on to the final score. So we want to say final score plus equals the current score. So this way, the final score will be stored between levels. If you actually quit the game or restart it in the editor, the progress is going to disappear. So if that's something you want to change, you might want to look into player preferences. But if you just play from start to end, this is going to work just fine. So if that's not good enough for you, you're going to have to look into some kind of saving system. Unity has a very easy one called player prefs. I believe I teach that in the Unity survival course, but if not, there's plenty of tutorials out there. And if you want to get very serious, you need to do some kind of binary serialization or something like that. There are also assets on the asset store to help you with this, but I don't think we're going to be going into it here. Cool. So now that we have that, let's simply save that out. And now we know that we have this static variable remembering our score. However, we are currently not displaying this variable. So right now I want to go ahead and create an end scene because we've had a look at our endpoint graphics, so we can delete that. We've done scene switching, we can delete that. Now it's time to properly end our game. So let's duplicate our main menu. I think that's going to be a good starting point for this. And let's call this the end level. Let's load it up. And actually I want to keep pretty much everything inside of this scene. However, I do want to delete our music and instead add in a game manager. So under prefabs, I'll drag in the GM object and place it at the top because I like to have it there. And we'll just leave the player as none and the game over sound as none, because we're not going to be using it because we're not actually playing our game here. This is just a menu of sorts. And then inside of our canvas, let's go under the 2D mode here and zoom in on that. I want to delete everything and instead create some text objects. The first one is going to be of course, UI text. And this is going to say game completed. I'm simply going to use the Arial font. I would recommend you get something more original, but that's going to be fine for now. You can simply import fonts by dragging them into the project and selecting them here. There are plenty on the asset store and that font or wherever you want to use. Then we're going to change the type to bold. We're going to center it on the X and Y. And we're going to definitely bump up the size here quite a bit. I want to make this really huge. And we're going to change the color here to white. You will, however, notice that this makes it blend with the background. So let's also add a shadow. Simply search for shadow, and this effect should be very quickly applied, and that just gives it this cool shadow edge. It's not a soft shadow. For that you will have to find another way, but this is going to work just fine for our use. So I'm simply going to drag it up a bit here, maybe just a bit more. Something like that. And under that I want to add a score. So let's call this the game completed text. Let's just duplicate that. Call this the score text. And let's make this a lot smaller. Something like 28 is going to be fine for now. Let's also make the actual object smaller. Let's drag this down, change it to score. And then we'll just put in a temporary number, which is going to be, let's say, 20, just to see how this will look. And basically, we can just use all of the same settings. However, I want to snap it to the left and drag it over a bit here. Also snap it to the top left corner, something like that. And I think that is going to be looking pretty great. I will just make this a bit less tall and just drag it up here to make it closer to the text. And I think that looks pretty nice. You can of course play around with this more to get it looking exactly how you want. Cool. So now we want to change this score text depending on what our score actually is. And also, while we remember it, let's add this level to the build settings. So simply drag in the end level here. Cool. So now let's create a script on the score text that will link up with the GM object to get its current score, or the final score, I should say. So let's call this the score GUI script, and let's make it of type JavaScript. And basically, I want to have this score GUI script access our GM object. And then I wanted to change the text component that we reference. So in order to do this, we simply need to access the final score, which is a static variable. So we don't need any references to our game master script. And this way we can simply go, we'll do this in the function start. And in here, we'll simply say that we need a reference, and we need a reference to our GUI object. So we'll call this the score text, and it's going to be of type text. Or you will notice that this doesn't work unless we import the Unity GUI system. So we need to import Unity Engine, which is the Unity namespace, .ui. This way, the text type will actually be imported. And now we can simply say score text, and to access the string that this hosts, we need to do .text. And we need to set that equal to game master, and remember this is capital because it's a static method or a static variable that we're trying to access. And then final score. And this should work just fine. This way we can go in here, and if we wait a bit, whoops, cannot convert into string. That's because we are currently setting the string score text.text equal to the integer of final score. And one way to get rid of this is to do .toString like this. Or we could simply just, and this is something we need to do anyways, say score like that plus GameMaster.FinalScore, because if we wanted to say score, we don't only want to display the number. So we're going to do that. Clear that, and you can see that we can now drag in our text, which is going to be the same object that it's currently sitting on. And now we can simply hit play, and this should change to a 0. Cool. You will, however, notice, and this is the other thing we have to change, up here it says score 0. We don't want this to be displayed on our end level, and actually we don't want it to be displayed anywhere else. I don't think this graphic is very pretty. I think we should be using the new UI system instead. And that's the final point, is updating the score display. So just like we've done it here, where this shows the final score on stat, we want to create an object up here on all of our levels that stores our current score on update. Cool, so let's actually implement that. So inside of our method here, we'll simply create a boolean. Because I think we should, oops, that's not the correct syntax. I think we should make this score GUI script both be able to be used on the actually, let's just make a separate script. We'll do that. So this is going to be our final score GUI. Let's rename that, make sure that it still sits on the score text here, the final score GUI. You might need to close it in mono develop to make sure it's synced up. And let's make another script of type JavaScript, and this is going to be our current score GUI. And this is going to update every time we draw a frame, because we don't know when it will be changing. We could make a method or a function for actually updating this text object, which we could then call every time we collect a coin. But for simplicity's sake, we're simply going to be updating inside of the update function. So very similarly, we are going to be doing almost the same. We're going to import the GUI system. So import Unity Engine, that's the namespace.ui. And we're going to store a reference to our score text of type text. And we are simply going to set our score text equal .text equal to score. Or maybe we should say coins or something like that. We could also say, I think I'm actually going to say coins collected plus, and then we're going to do GameMaster.current score. It should be that simple. Hopefully this will be working. Now we need to simply load up a level, hit save on that. And we need to change the GameMaster script here to not display the ugly GUI that we've currently been using. So simply remove that GUI method there. And we can also delete the size X and size and all of this offset code, because that's just for messing around with the GUI. Instead, we're going to be using the pretty new GUI system. And in here, I simply want to create a UI text. And you will notice that it automatically creates the canvas too. And let's just call this GUI. Let's do GUI canvas. And let's rename this to score text. And let's set this onto the GM object. I think that would be a pretty good idea, because this way we can simply... No, because that way it's going to be displayed everywhere. So let's make this into a separate object and simply have that sit on all levels that we create. And in here, we are simply going to rename our score text to coins collected. And then let's just insert 20 again here. Let's make this a lot bigger. center it. Bump up the font size. Let's do something like 20. Bring it up here. Let's also snap it to the top. Or anchor it to the top so that when we the screen is resized, it will move with the top here, as you can see. And let's change this to white and add a shadow again. See how that's looking. I think that's pretty great. And now we simply want to make this actually update. We could make a tiny background for this. That's kind of up to you if that's something you want to do. You could also change it to black and add a white outline. You could do lots of things here. You can see how that looks in black. We might just want to keep that in black. I definitely want it to be bold, actually, and let's bump it up even higher. Maybe that's even better. I don't know. I actually like the white. Whoops. The white with a black shadow, but we can make the shadow a bit bigger. So we can do 2 here and -2, and maybe also make it less transparent. Something like that looks pretty fun, actually. Cool. So of course play around with that, and now we simply need to drag on our final score script to that object. No, not our final score, our current score script to that object, and simply drag in the text onto the score text. Awesome, now we can simply drag this into the prefabs folder, and we can make sure that it's added to level 2 also. So let's load up level 2 and drag in the presets here, the GUI canvas, and just drag it up here. And now, when we play the main menu, hit play game, coins collected 0, coins collected 1, we go on to the next level. Oh, it resets to 0 because that's dependent on the level. It's gonna say 1 here. We're gonna load the final level and it's gonna say score is 2. So that's exactly what we needed. And frankly, that's the end of a very long tutorial. This was, wow, this was actually pretty long. I think it's enough to barely fit into one video. So that's awesome. And yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to show today. I know this was a lot of coding and back and forth, and we did some graphics and everything. So I hope you caught it. And if not, you can simply copy my steps and you will understand at some point, don't worry. But yeah, thanks for watching the video. Again, if you have any questions about this, go to forum.brackeys.com and also check out the new store at brackeys.spreadshirt.net. Cool, so that was everything for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.